Sure. Hello and welcome to the Business of Sports conversation. This conversation is intended to help you, the college student, as you navigate an array of opportunities within the unique world of sports, which is as much as a business as it is an entertainment vehicle. Our special guest today is Mark Gubicza. Mark has a long and decorated career in the world of professional sports, a proud native of Philadelphia, 14-year veteran in Major League Baseball, now retired, obviously. As a pitcher, he enjoyed two trips to the All-Star game, and his career highlight, of course, is being a member of the World Series champion Kansas City Royals. We just won't say which year, so we don't date our friend here. Like I said earlier, 14 seasons in the big leagues, 13 with the Kansas City Royals, his final season with the then Anaheim Angels. And speaking of the Angels, he's since transitioned into a very successful sports broadcasting career, principally for the Angels. He's dabbled in coaching. He's also dabbled in some different types of media, which we'll touch upon pending on time. Mark, first and foremost, thank you very much for taking the time.
Jeff, my pleasure, man. How's everything going with you?
Everything's going great. Appreciate you as always sharing your knowledge and your, like I said earlier, your valuable time with these young students here as they look to take your job eventually. Although I'm guessing they're not going to see much time in the World Series. Um, you're in your home in Southern California. I'm in my home in Southern California, but you grew up on the East Coast, Philly. Were you always a sports fan? Did sports come something that was of interest to you right out of the gate, as you best recall?
Yeah, Jeff. I mean, I love all sports teams back in Philly. And of course, if you've seen any kind of Philly game, you know, all the passion you have as a fan. But, playing stickball at the schoolyard when I was growing up, pretending I'm Harry Callis, who was an incredible announcer, or Richie Ashburn, and trying to be my favorite Phillies like Mike Schmidt and Greg Lazinski. Right in that same schoolyard, there was a basketball hoop. I was pretending I was Dr. J and George McGinnis and Moses Malone and all those guys. And I do have a couple veneers from pretending I'm a hockey player too, taking a hockey puck right to my mouth, thinking I'm Bobby Clark and all the great Flyer players over the years too, and playing football all the time. So listening to all the games for sports. Literally, I was telling a story just the other day, Jeff, that literally I wake up, I was out of the house immediately playing some kind of sport, coming home for lunch. My mom made, the lunch, back out again, home for dinner, back out again. So I was constantly doing something, whether I was playing a sport, pretending I'm one of the announcers, but it gave, because I had like 14, 15 guys every single day we were hanging out at the schoolyard. So we always had a team to be able to play against amongst each other. So it was always a blast. And for me, it brought us all together, whether it's in a conversation about how our team is playing or how poorly our team is playing. But we were always finding a way to be able to do something together. And the best way to do that was playing sports.
The Philadelphia sports market is a unique one. I think you used the word earlier, passionate. Some might call it toxic to a certain extent, especially when you get to a certain level with the pros. But as a kid, you mentioned follow some of the broadcasters in the area there on the baseball end in particular. Did you have a sense that Philly was unique? I mean, obviously, one football team, one basketball team, one hockey team, one baseball team. College sports, but not to the extent that we have here in Los Angeles, for example. Did you realize it was a unique place, a special place, even back when you were a kid?
Yeah, I mean, because having three older brothers and my dad was the same way. We never missed anything. We didn't have necessarily. We mentioned college sports there on the football side for sure. Baseball, basketball, we had the Big Five, which if anybody ever got a chance to experience crazy crowds, the Palestra in Philadelphia, where you have the five sports teams there, the college teams, Villanova, St. Joe, Temple, Penn. It's LaSalle College. It was still is the craziest environment ever. So that part of it was big for us as kids growing up, but professional sports, and especially watching on the baseball side. My dad played minor league baseball with the White Sox in the early 50s. So we were all, and had, like I mentioned, having older brothers, idolizing him. My one oldest brother was 7 years older than me. So I used to be the bat boy for his little league team and being around the kids, watching how they played. But it was really wild, Jeff, how they played. Every single guy's swing was patterned after one of the guys on the Phillies. So that's why I think when I talk about the passion and love for sports growing up in that environment, we didn't know anybody else. We didn't think of any other team as being any good, even though there was a lot of lean years in Philly sports. Other than the Flyers in the '70s, where they won back-to-back Stanley Cups, there was a lot of losing for Philly teams. But we still emulated every single player in all those sports because we wanted to be them, and we all hoped. The only thing I ever thought about growing up was becoming a professional baseball player. I didn't know think it was ever going to happen. Obviously, you only play baseball out there 3-4 months a year because of the weather, but that's the only thing I ever thought of, and eventually ended up where I am. Is one of those things where we talked about that at the schoolyard with my buddies every single day. It was like Goodwill Hunting. We were trying to find a way to get out of Philly where we were at and be a professional athlete at all costs. I was the one fortunate one to be able to get out of there and do that.
As a kid, we just love playing sports, and
Yeah.
the teams are and the players are our heroes and whatnot. At a certain point, as we get older, we get into the business on a professional level. We realize it's a business. Do you have recollections of, maybe the media in Philadelphia being tough on a Mike Schmidt, being tough on I guess every Eagles quarterback who's ever played, and did you as a fan? Like, did you appreciate it? Did you, as a young athlete, resent it? I'm just kind of curious, from a media standpoint, how you viewed that market as a youngster who obviously doesn't know what you know now. But again, this by no means is a soft market, and if you don't produce, you're not going to be very popular in that city.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeff, because many times going to Veterans Stadium, which is no longer there, where the Eagles and the Phillies played, hearing the crowd booing Mike Schmidt, and I often question, I'm thinking, we're watching one of the greatest players that's ever played the sport. And when you look at his Cooperstown numbers, he's arguably top 3, 4 of all time at third base. Yet a lot of booing, and part of it was because of the relationship he had with the media. And I even saw the documentary with Mike Schmidt and how he had such a tough time realizing and understanding how the media treated and asked questions for the players, and he became kind of aloof from the media, and eventually that carried over to us fans. But I never did, and I eventually ended up being pretty good friends with him. I'd always joke. I said I might be one of the few people that didn't boo you all the time because I understood how great you were. Same thing with Dr. J for the Sixers, one of the greatest players ever. So much fun. The dunk he had against the Lakers there in the '83, NBA championship series. By the way, I really am dating myself, but they would always, the media would go, well, he doesn't have a great outside shot. So we're thinking, okay, what does that matter? He's scoring 20 plus points a game, playing some solid defense, getting the rebounds, leading the team to a championship for a club that back in the '70s was 9-73. Imagine being a fan for a team that's 9 wins and 73 losses, but you still were fans of Kobe Bryant's dad was on that team, Joe Bryant, Jelly Bean. So we loved him. We tried to shoot like him, but you get caught up into, man, he's not good, so we should boo. But a lot of times when you think back and look at it and go, it was fun just to see the player play and realize that, hey, we're watching greatness. We don't have to be perfect on the court or on the basketball, field, anything, football field, the rink. It's just the way they played. I think most players in Philly that played like, the tough blue collar guys like a Bobby Clark in hockey, they never really felt the wrath of Philly fans that much because they were one of them. He's playing with, missing teeth. He's got blood going down his cheeks after getting hit or with a stick or maybe a punch. Those guys never really felt the wrath of Philly fans that much. But then I wasn't really into the booing part as much as a majority of the fans were there. So that's a battle back and forth it was for me as a fan growing up, knowing and realizing how difficult the sport was. And I think that's really carried into what I'm doing now, understanding how difficult it is to play sports at that level. And, there's going to be criticism, and sometimes you got to be honest about that. But still, it's not where you sit there and it's automatically boo somebody because they failed to do something at one play.
The path of a baseball player, even back in your day, so to speak, there's no one way to get to where you got. Was college baseball something that you aspire to at that point, or maybe not as much as a young football player would have been in your position? Obviously, hockey's unique. Every sport's unique, but just as you looked at college athletics, college baseball in particular, did you see that as a viable vehicle for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of, I didn't realize or even have any idea exactly. My junior year in high school, everything was coming together. I love basketball. It was still the sport I loved the most, and baseball was right there with it. I'm playing stickball, like I mentioned, wire ball, throwing a baseball off the telephone wires and learning how to react, how to catch it, building my arm strength up, throwing a baseball against my house back home because we live in those row homes, and I would just do that and then throw it all day long, whatever I could with the weather wise. But then my junior year, I played in an American Legion All Star game where it was Eastern versus Western Pennsylvania, and all my team. Steve Bono ended up being an NFL quarterback, and Jamie Moyer, who pitched in the big leagues. We were all on the same team. And David Amaro, whose dad, Ruben Amaro Sr., was a first base coach with the Phillies. So all of a sudden, I'm going there because every scout wants to see those guys play. Then all of a sudden, I started performing at a pretty high level. Then all of a sudden, like, who's this guy? And then so my senior year in high school, there's scouts everywhere. And I'm thinking, what are these guys doing? They all got their radar guns pointed out there saying, hey, how hard is he throwing? And before long, they started talking to my dad and our coach there too. And then it started becoming clear that maybe something's going on here. So then, colleges are calling. So my first visit was Ohio State, which the campus itself was it's gigantic. My next visit, I'm going to University of Georgia, which I absolutely love. I really fell in love with that place. I often tell the story that the coach Steve Weber there, he had a daughter there, and his family was so nice. We went over and met the whole family. It was a little girl named Ashley. She was about 2 or 3 years old, and then eventually naming one of my daughters Ashley because I thought she was the coolest little girl I've ever seen in my life. Very polite. And then the next one, I go to Alabama, and I meet, believe it or not, Bear Bryant, Coach Bear Bryant. And he comes up, he goes, son, you look big enough to play college football for me, sir. And I go, sir, I beg to differ. I think they would eat me for lunch. He goes, yeah, stick to baseball. And then, so then eventually it led to going to Duke University. That's where we drove down from Philly, which was a little bit easier way to get down there with my mom and dad, and they fell in love with the campus. So I signed my letter of intent. I was going to go to Duke University, but still, all my mind was on was baseball. And I went to a pretty tough school. It would be equivalent to out here, be like a Harvard Westlake or a Chaminade school out in Philly. So I was into the education part of it, but again, all I was thinking about was playing baseball. And then when I got drafted by the Royals, it came that decision where I had my mom going crazy saying she wants me to go to Duke. My dad's like going, I'm going to let him make his own decision. So I'm in there with John Shearholtz, who was a head of our minor league system at that point, who now is in the Hall of Fame, one of the greatest general managers in history. He's in my row home in my small little house, negotiate a contract. And my dad just looked me in my eyes. He goes, "What do you want to do?" I go, "Dad, it's the only thing I ever want to do is play baseball." So then that's when I decided to go give baseball a shot and sign it in the contract and went right down to Sarasota, Florida in rookie ball and played minor league baseball.
When you get drafted by the Kansas City Royals, I'm sure the first thing that kind of comes to mind is Kansas City, Missouri, Kansas City, Kansas. I'm just putting myself in your spot. They've got the Chiefs, obviously they've got the Royals. Or are you even like, that's 2, 4, 6 years ahead. I'm now looking at rookie ball. I'm looking at Sarasota, Florida, like you did. From a business standpoint, what were your initial reactions of joining an organization for the first time, and what was important to you in terms of that path to what would ultimately be Kauffman or Stadium or Royal Stadium?
Yeah, it was weird too, Jeff, because here I am getting drafted by the Royals in '81. I'm at the World Series Game 6, Royals versus Phillies. The only game I ever went to with my dad in my lifetime. And here it is, Game 6, the clincher, the first time the Phillies had ever won a World Series. And they've been in existence forever, like since what, 1890s or 1900, and they never won a World Series. So here I am with my dad, and we're hugging and embracing the Phillies finally won a World Series. So then you fast forward to that 6, 8 months later. Here I am drafted by that team where I was screaming bad stuff at George Brett, Willie Wilson, and all the guys on the Royals. And here I am now drafted by the Royals. And I remember going, boy, I was really upset that I was not drafted by the Phillies because they had a chance because at that being in the World Series. So you're the last pick. The Royals were just before that. So I was a compensation pick for when Darrell Porter was with the Royals, goes to the Cardinals. So I was a sandwich really between the first and second round. So I was so mad at that point that I was drafted by Kansas City and not the Phillies. But my dad made a great point. He goes, son, the Royals have been in the playoffs for like 5 years in a row. You're going to a top-notch organization. And then finally I step back. I go, you're right. It's one of the best organizations in baseball. They patterned themselves a lot like the Dodgers, the script on their jerseys, the way they built their farm system. So here I am going into that farm system where a number of their major league players came from their farm system. So I think, and I had a conversation with my dad, the same thing. You go, you know what, this might be the best fit for you because they're really big on developing their own players. So this might be your best shot of making the major leagues. When it happens, we don't know, but at least give yourself the best chance.
How much of an eye opener is minor league baseball? Whether you're a first, second round pick, you were there in the compensation pick, sandwich pick, playing against guys who were probably 50th round picks back when I think they had 50 rounds.
Yeah.
The bright lights of the World Series are probably a long ways away. No guarantees. Um, the money was you fill in the blank.
Yeah, it was thing was getting drafted where I was. At that point, you're seeing guys now, if the pick I was, they were going to get 3, 4, 5 million dollars. We're getting just enough to be able to get down to the airport and get down there to Sarasota, Florida. So here I am being in we always joke about, the row homes. You see the Rocky movies, Cement Jungle, that's Philadelphia. I'm going down to Sarasota, Florida. We're staying off this complex. They had a baseball academy built the Royals back in it's off of Clark Road, still down there in Sarasota, where there was nothing there. All there was it almost felt like I was in a college dorm. I was originally in a room with four guys that were drafted, and I'm in a bunk bed, and the other guy was in a bunk. We're like 6'5", 6'7". Our feet are hanging over these bunk beds, and finally they switched the rooms up for us where it was a little more comfortable. We had all our meals there. And the only thing really there was this big lake where you might go fishing or something, but there was also some alligators around there too. So I didn't want to, go out there. And the closest thing for us was a 7-Eleven that was literally maybe a mile or two away from this, the baseball complex there. That was it. So we'd have to walk to 7-Eleven and, grab a hot dog or whatever it was if we wanted to. So it was a whole different environment. I remember when I first went away, I was so homesick. I'm writing letters every day to all my buddies. And I'm thinking, you know what? I kept thinking, if I get hurt, I don't care. I'll go home, because it was so hard going away for the first time. I know everyone deals with that when they go away to college. It's tough when you first go away, but then all of a sudden, my best friend and roommate there, David Cohn, who's ended up being a tremendous, major league pitcher himself, we became friends. He's from Kansas City, I'm from Philly, and my other friend, this kid named Tony Ferrer, was from Southern California, the Riverside area. They kept calling us the Three Musketeers. We were all drafted really similar together. We're all three pitchers. We all end up having pretty good quick rises to the major league level, but we became friends, all different backgrounds because I'm the guy from Philly, he's the guy from the Midwest, and the other guy's the one from California. But we bonded almost immediately, and then eventually I couldn't stop loving the game of baseball and working every day to think, okay, all our goal is now is to being rookie ball is go to A ball, then hopefully go to double A, then hopefully go to triple A, then maybe, just maybe, to the major league level.
You beat the odds. David Cohn beat the odds. If you look back now at the majority of the players who were in the minor league system at that time, or even now in this day and age, a large percentage of them don't go to college. Large
Mm-hmm.
percent of them don't make money, if much, if at all, in the minor leagues. And then maybe 23, 24, 25, 26. It's time to hang up the spikes, look at where they're at in society. They don't
Yeah.
have a college degree. Their business acumen is, different than the people who they were going to high school with probably at that time. How nervous were you if baseball didn't work out that from a just a general business of life standpoint, you might be behind, those people you grew up with, because suddenly you're 26 years old and your dreams of a baseball career are gone.
Yeah, that was a tough thing. So Jeff, literally, our rookie ball team, we win the rookie ball league championship. We were like, I want to say like 47-16, incredible team. The very next spring training, I kid you not, there's like four of us there. That's it. Our best friends from those teams are literally at that first spring training all together. We're getting pulled into the manager's office and released, and I'm seeing the crying and this shock on their face, thinking here their dream is gone that quickly. And we, like I said, we won almost every single game. Every guy played incredibly well. So I'm thinking, oh, could this be me down the road here real quickly? So you try to clear that out of your mind. I mean, on the financial side, you're getting $11 a day, literally $11 a day to have three meals. And then you had to give like $1 to the clubhouse guy. So you were basically getting three meals on $10. So you weren't eating good. The travel, like my first real bus trip, I remember going from Jacksonville to Memphis, Tennessee, 16 hours, being it was either freezing on the bus or exceptionally hot. So, but I never complained about it. I never stopped in my dream of going to the major league level. All I kept thinking was, it just what it is. And we're on the bus, we're singing, we're having a good time. You're friends with these guys, but then you realize how difficult it is. You're friends with them just for like 6 months, and you may not ever see them again. We try to keep in touch for years after that, but it's always tough because now here I'm the guy that's eventually going to make it to the big leagues, and those guys never got out of A ball or double A, so their dreams were shattered. So that was the tough part of it. You didn't get that huge signing bonus, so you really didn't have. You're getting an apartment with three or four guys sharing it. Very limited food, like I said, but everyone still had that same look and passion in their mind and in their heart that it all will be worth it if you made it to the big league level. So when it did make it for the guys, and I've seen a lot of them where, what do you do with your life? I mean, you've given up your opportunity to go to college. So in my mind was, when I left, I told my dad I'm going to give this 4 years. If I don't do it, I promise I will come back and go to school. Obviously, the education at Duke is long gone. Out to find a different way, a community college, whatever it was going to be, or a local college back in Philly. But that was my mindset. That was my safety net, that I was going to do that. That I was going to go to school no matter what. I promised my parents that if I didn't do it within 4 years. But luckily enough, I made it up there even quicker than I even anticipated, especially coming out of high school where, my first pitch I threw, this kid hits a line drive right off my wrist. I'm thinking, whoa, everybody is as good, if not better than I was in high school. And then I'm facing college kids that were already physically and mentally mature as compared to me, a high school kid that was homesick. So it was an adjustment. It was a battle, but still there was something in my mind that said I was not going to fail, or at least not give it everything I have to make that opportunity come true, my dreams come true.
Well, 13 years with the Kansas City Royals, end up being a member of the Royals Hall of Fame, probably something you would not have envisioned that first day you walked into the clubhouse as a rookie, but you ultimately get, called up, recalled by the Royals. Small market, a franchise that was family owned, a franchise that, like you had mentioned earlier, had a lot of success, although not having uh, won the World Series by that point. But just what were your general impressions of the Kansas City market? You know Philly, you know what that's like. Um, very close to New York, which we'll touch upon at some point in this conversation as well, even though you never played in New York. But what were your general impressions of small market Kansas City?
I love the people there, the passion they had. And one thing I noticed, and even throughout my entire career, was if you played hard, they love you. Just don't ever say anything negative back to City, and they will embrace you as if you're a native Kansas Cityan. And driving on the I-70, I'll never forget. I wish we had cell phones at that moment. So we're driving I-70. We're going behind the stadium, and you see the crown, and it was like drizzling out, so it was misty. And I remember that my eyes were like wide open. I was like, this felt like it was a movie. So immediately I'm seeing this. I'm like, I can't believe this. I've made the big leagues, and this stadium is the most beautiful stadium I've ever seen in my entire life. and we get into the clubhouse, and the clubhouse is about 80,000 times bigger than in my actual house I lived in. So, I waited and actually lived with George Brett my first year, at least the first few weeks of my first year, and even a little bit of my second year until he helped me and Brett Saberhagen find an apartment out there in the Kansas City area. But I remember going to his house that night and I said, George, can I use your phone? He goes, yeah, why not? I said, I just want to call my parents and say and explain how this felt like. And I explained it from the drizzling of the water and the rain coming down and the mist and the bright light of the crown which says Kansas City Royals. And I could tell they were in tears. And I was too. And I even, when I got put into the Royals Hall of Fame, I told that story where I said, I'm living a dream. And my dad specifically said, son, don't ever wake up from this dream. And it felt like a dream. And it was like the whole time I was there. And the people, it's my two oldest kids were born in Kansas City. They were, and till this day, when I go back there, it was his home. The fans were great. Everything about where we lived in this area where it was right by a golf course. Marty Schottenheimer lived in that area, the old football coach for the Chiefs, and running into him all the time. And it was a beautiful area. I mean, and being it from Philadelphia, then going to Kansas City, yeah, there was a huge difference. But I look now, obviously doing stuff with the Angels and playing for the Angels and broadcasting here. The travel was so much easier in the Midwest. Everything was about an hour, hour and a half away. When you're in California, everything's like 3 hours minimum or 5 hours away. So it was travel wise, everything about that, and scheduling wise, it was a lot easier because nothing was really hard or far away. That's why I always respect teams that win playing on the West Coast in any sport, because the travel, and as you know this, Jeff, it's so hard compared to the Midwest and the East Coast where everything's a little bit closer as far as the cities.
Let's kind of focus on the media. At that time, I'm going to envision you walking into a clubhouse and look, you have a lot of things on your mind. New teammates, the big leagues, all the challenges, living on your own, things of that nature. Don't get me wrong, but kind of think back from a media standpoint. I'm going to guess, one or two beat writers from the local newspapers, Kansas City Star, if I have that correct.
Yeah.
This was maybe a little bit before sports talk radio became what it became. Television stations, probably, three, four television stations, NBC, CBS, ABC, maybe, I'm not sure about Fox affiliate then, but, and then you'd have team broadcasters. I'm going to imagine that not every Royals game was on television back then, but probably the majority of them, probably every game was on the radio. As you kind of started to learn to navigate the media aspects of your new job, did I kind of paint a good picture there?
Yeah, I mean, it was, the big thing was too, if you have a good game, it's so easy to deal with the media, easy. But when you have a bad game and they got to ask a tough question to you, you kind of wondered how you're going to be able to react to it and if you're going to be good or not. So I always remember, and I had to go back to my old roommate George Brett. Like he had a bad game, and he would over and talk to him, and he answered, in a good way, a polite way, and the right way, and made no excuses. So one day, real early in my career, I go, George, how do you deal with the media asking these questions after a tough game? He goes, what do you mean? They're doing their job, and it's easy to do an interview after you do well. It's the ones you do after you have a tough game. So I learned right away that to be courteous to the reporters because they have a job and they're going to ask tough questions. So the better you are as far as answered it without being combative, the better you were. So I remember one time, even in New York, I lost the game 1-0. The one pitch they scored one run. Basically, was on a wild pitch. I still to this day say it was a pass ball,
Yeah,
and
of
it should have
course.
been a pass ball. And they go, "Hey, do you feel like you cost your team the game?" And the first inclination is the way I was at Philly. I'm like, "What are you talking about? I gave up one run in 9 innings against a great Yankee team." I go, "Yeah, it was my fault. I should have never threw that pitch. If I don't throw that pitch, we're still playing right now." And you could tell they were kind of baiting me to be combative. But as soon as I said that, they go, and then they walked away and went. So I asked some other question to someone else. So I learned from George right away, and it was tough. I mean, after a game where you're just battling as a pitcher, starting pitcher, you go out there every 5 days. So you're like a gladiator. You're getting the cage is open, and you're going out there to fight. So if you have a tough game or you blow a game yourself, it's sometimes you want to be that angry guy, but there's a job for the media to do, and be honest. And that's the one thing I always pattern myself doing this. What I'm doing now is just be honest. Don't say the negative things just to say it, just to get a reaction. So being in that environment, Kansas City obviously is a lot easier to be in as far as when you have a bad game as compared to Philly or New York or something like that. But that being said, I was always there, and to this day, everybody ever worked there, they go, "We really appreciate you always being there right away, not staying in the trainer's room with ice on your shoulder forever, so you can wait them out so they leave." I immediately did what I saw George Brett doing. That's to be ready and available to answer questions right away.
For the students watching this who, potentially have the opportunity to ultimately, enter a clubhouse of some sort and be in that position holding a camera or a tape recorder, there's no one answer for this, but if you look back, you'd have 25 teammates. Is it fair to say that, maybe even now with the Angels, as you cover this team as a broadcaster, five guys love doing interviews,
Mm-hmm.
five guys hate doing interviews, five guys, well, maybe English is their second language, so they're not comfortable doing interviews, even though they wouldn't mind it. And then you just probably have about 10 guys who don't really care. I mean, just kind of walk me through how you would view that in and amongst your teammates.
Yeah, you're exactly right about that, Jeff. There's a lot of guys that you made it uncomfortable for media members to come into the clubhouse. And, so I always, the big thing is even like when you start seeing female reporters in there, that was a thing where we had a couple guys that were pretty tough on them. And I remember, probably know Susan Walden, who does a tremendous job on the Yankees radio. And she, till this day, always comes up to me and says, "Thank you for what I did." Because a couple guys always saying silly stuff. So I went up to him while she was there, I said, "Hey guys, she has a job to do. Let her do it and answer the questions." Because at that point, I was more of a veteran on the team and I felt I had that control of the clubhouse. But I built so many good relationships with every single member of the media, whether it was the TV side, the radio side, the print media. I always said, "Hey, I have no problem. We go out and have a bite to eat or have a cold one after a game." They were on our flights every time. The media members were on our planes. Not that you don't see that anymore now, basically, especially from the print side, that the relationships I built with them was perfect because I said, "Hey, you better write. If I'm horrible, say I was horrible. But also, I'm not going to change our friendships and the relationships we have because that's your job. And my job is to be successful. When I'm not successful, then I deserve whatever, criticism or whatever you want to write." And they felt really good about it coming up to me and never really were nervous about asking me a question like, "Why'd you throw that pitch to Jose Canseco?" And I'll go, "Well, because I made a mistake and he hit it 450 feet. That's why." Those kind of things. So building relationships, whenever I ask anybody ever asks about, what they want to do in the media side, is building relationships with the players is the biggest thing for me. Because the more the player's comfortable with you around, or not, you're not one of those people that's wait in the background and with a microphone and take someone else's answer. Build a relationship with the players, and you'd be amazed how easy that is for the players to be at ease, I should say, with you as a member of the media when you build relationships like that.
And also maybe take a moment here to explain to this audience that, remember the clubhouse is your office.
Mm-hmm.
There and having been someone who's entered many clubhouses, with a credential and a tape recorder and not having established relationships with those people, as a beat writer would or someone who's regularly around the team. It's not necessarily comfortable for that media member either because, kind of explained the clubhouse. That is, after all, your place of business, your office, and speaking frankly, boys will be boys, and there's not exactly an HR director 5 feet away in a clubhouse.
Yeah, that was the thing too. I always felt the clubhouse was my home away from home, and that was the oddest thing when I first made it to major league level. That immediately, like after the game, you have that little breathing room time, but they're in there almost like right away. It's like, in my mind was like, how are they in here? Isn't there like a room where you go in there to do your press conferences and things like that? I remember seeing all those movies back in the day where they did that, but here they are immediately in your clubhouse. So like I said, I observed the veterans on our team in Kansas City. And part of the reason why the Royals, in my opinion, at that point were so good is because they had players, they drafted players, and basically, help players be better human beings. So I watch all these guys, the way they treated people. It was easy for me to make that adjustment. And then eventually I became that veteran who would teach the younger players coming up through the major league level to be that good human being when they come in, because it's a tough job. You're right. It's a tough one going into those clubhouses. Even to this day, I generally will have most of my conversations with the guys in the dugout or at a coffee shop on the road or on the plane or on the bus. I always still feel that the clubhouse is their home. So I go in there it's something where like Mike Trout's going to have a conversation with the media about something going on or whatever it is, or when Shohei was with the Angels, or now with Zach Neto or Logan. All these guys now, I give them their space, but they also understand that, when I go in there, I have a job to do, just like everyone else going in there now. Whether you're trying to get if Erica is going in there to get an interview with a guy in the clubhouse, they've already understand that we're not going in there to invade space. We're going in there to have a conversation, and part of our job is to get that unfiltered soundbite where you're not out in the dugout. It's always like, well, yeah, I'm just trying to give 110%, all those kind of things. Sometimes you can get a raw or this spontaneous answer when you're in the clubhouse because they're comfortable as a player in their home, which is the clubhouse. So that's why a lot of those interviews go on inside the clubhouse.
My personal opinion is baseball has been behind the curve on a lot of the access points and a lot of, utilizing the new technology. But I want to say the last year or two, as we talk here, we're seeing interviews with players during the World Series. We're seeing players maybe even microphoned, with a mic on during the World Series. We're now seeing cameras in the clubhouse before the game as guys are getting dressed, things that kind of became, really everyday stuff in other sports. And I think personally, baseball was always a little behind the curve on that. First off, do you agree on that? And secondly, is it just an understanding that, baseball is like any other business? You need to sell what's best. In this case, your best asset are your star players.
Yeah, I mean, I think baseball, for part of the reason why that was always a more difficult thing, was it's an everyday game. It's the only sport where you play every day. Football, it's once a week, so it's not that it's easier, but it's once a week. Hockey and basketball, two, three times a week, as you know, maybe four times a week. So it's the everyday grind. I think part of it is, and PR directors respected that or thought that was part of the reason, for baseball not being in there all the time and having access like that. But I've been a big proponent of, we have so many incredible athletes and superstars in the game. Baseball has to do a way better job of promoting the sport because, granted, this World Series, that obviously the ratings and everything else, our All Star games way better than any other All Star games, and it's getting to the point where fans now are realizing and getting to know the personality. That's why I do my Gooby Tuesdays thing, where I started that about 10 years ago. And same reason why you're asking this question is, how do we get fans to understand different personalities of play? Before it was like the game. That's all you talked about. So now I'm asking, their favorite band or whatever movie they like, their food and all this thing. And now you're seeing more and more of that around the game where you're seeing the personalities. And it's okay to ask those things, even though you're playing every day. The guys are fine with that because they want to be part of this themselves. The social media world has been big for the players too, as far as promoting their whatever they're doing, away from the game, whether it's a charity or a Mike Trout's having his golf course built in the Jersey area. So all these things come into play now, and I think baseball finally, like you said, is finally figuring out that the best way for the generation of fans coming now is they're finding through social media and interviews and read and seeing their personalities. That's the best way for the game to expand and get better, because now you're seeing, hey, they're not just robots out there playing every day. These guys are funny. They like music that we like, or they eat the same kind of foods we like, but we never knew any of that stuff, and we never had access to any of that stuff. Now we do.
One last question pertaining to the Royals. You mentioned names like George Brett is a Hall of Fame baseball player. You mentioned earlier a guy like Willie Wilson, who, if you're a hardcore baseball fan, you know who that is from that generation. But you had the unique distinction of playing with arguably the world's biggest, most popular athlete at the time. I don't know if world or North America, but I'm talking about Bo Jackson. And for this audience, in the event you do not know who he is, please pause this recording and take a look and then maybe put Nike next to his name as well. But in short, the first of its kind all-star baseball player, all-star football player, playing at the same time, two different teams, obviously, two different markets with the LA Raiders and the Kansas City Royals as a baseball player. Soft-spoken guy, small town country guy. But I mean, talk about having the world stage on you. Was there anyone like Bo Jackson that we will see again in terms of media attention, popularity for a multi-sport athlete?
You know what, Jeff? If Bo Jackson was doing what he did with us then, now it would be unbelievable. He would be as big as any rock star, any movie star, anyone in the history of the world. Because being around him, even then, when you had very limited as far if any social media aspects, it's all about the games itself. So I remember when we played together in the All Star game at the Big A in '89 when he hits the home run. You have Vin Scully on the call, President Reagan on the call, and Vin Scully say hello to Bo Jackson. Bo Jackson says hello when he hits a home run. And we're on the plane flying back from LA to New York. We're playing the Yankees, and the pilots are coming out of the cockpit and asking for his autograph. And that's what I'm thinking, wow. And first of all, I don't like flying. I'm like, sir, who's flying this plane? And he goes, oh, did you ever see the airplane movies? And I'm like, oh my God, no, you're not telling me that. That's too crazy. So then we land in New York, and it's like, boom, it's like Mick Jagger was with me. And it was incredible. Like the only guy like you see like a Mike Trout or Shohei Ohtani in the way I am right now, and the people I'm around the most, that's the kind of craziness that I saw with Bo. Going to the football games because he gave me sideline passes every time. So I'm there. Bob Golick, Howie Long, and all those guys are going, this dude is not real. The way he's just flying by everybody. And he literally just got off the baseball field. And if somebody was in front of him, he's running over them. And they couldn't believe how big and strong and fast he was. And he only was there a couple days after the baseball season, and seeing the things he was doing everywhere he went, like walking out with him after the football games at the Coliseum, and the fans were just going ballistic for him. Same thing with the Royals everywhere we went. So I remember when Shohei was with us with the Angels, I was trying to put together because Bo was out there living out there in the Chicago area still, and he has a place elsewhere. I said I got to get him together and have the Bo No Show. So it couldn't work out because Bo was down there. He does a really good charity thing down there in Alabama. Bikes for Bo, raising money for the people that lost their home in a tornado down there. So he's still doing that to this day. But Shohei's that way where he can't go anywhere, do anything. But Bo was that way before social media, so I couldn't imagine him being able to do anything, go anywhere. He would say that like he never went anywhere when we were on the road. So it was always difficult for him to be able to go out because everyone knew him only from watching the Nike commercials, which were gigantic, and or the baseball games and the feats he was doing, running up the wall in Baltimore. That throw he throws that Harold Reynolds at the plate we see up in the Kingdome in Seattle, but also what he was doing, Brian Bosworth running over him, trying to tackle when he's with the Seahawks. So he was doing stuff that no one ever could do, and Deion Sanders did it, Brian Jordan. They were really good, both football and baseball, but there was no one quite like the athlete that Bo was. He was so strong, yet he was so fast. His first at bat, it was against Steve Carlton when he was with Cleveland. Hits a home run or ball, should have been a home run. He, to this day, it was over the foul pole, so far over it that they called a foul. But he, to this day, is convinced it was over the foul pole, but it was just, it's one of those things where we didn't have the technology to look. Then he hits a ground ball after that foul ball to second base and beats it out for an infield hit. We're all in the dugout going, wait a minute, this guy hits a ball about 500 feet and then hits a ground ball, a right-handed batter hits a ground ball to second base and beats it out. We're all like going, this guy is not real. And he was like, God just dropped this human being from heaven down on earth, and he's playing. So he was that good of a player.
And the commercial platform that top stars have now, top athletes have now, Serena Williams or Tiger Woods or Shohei Ohtani or whomever, we kind of take for granted. But the Air Jordan and the bow nose for you as an athlete in that time period, that must have just been eye-opening because that's usually something reserved for, actors or whatnot. And now the sports marketing boom starts with, I have to assume, Air Jordan and Bo in and around that same time.
Oh, no question, no question. And I was represented by Nike too, so I was just trying to cling on to Bo there, thinking, hey, maybe I'll get an extra pair of spikes or something like that now. But for athletes at that point, especially baseball players at that point, we're thinking, okay, now there's a platform for players to, do these commercials, make that extra money, expand the game. I mean, when you think about it, at that point, Bo was expanding that game globally because of people now all of a sudden see that, Wayne Gretzky in there, Bo Diddley is part of those commercials, and football players part of that commercial. Like Bo knows what, and it was so clever how they did that. Just a shame that when you mentioned this earlier in our interview that not enough people got to know how incredible Bo Jackson was because it was such a short period of time, about what, 6 7 years, where he was doing the things he did. If he had this a long career, and in this day and age, it would have been something, we would have seen so many different movies made about him, and almost like gladiator type movies where he was, Maximus in there, where he did things where there's no way this person was able to do this, because football, watching on the sidelines at that point, I mean, these guys just crushed each other. I mean, these guys were strong, fast, and there was a lot less rules and penalties called where you protected the players. It was this physicality back at that point.
As a player, and last question about your playing career, you had to have given thought to, okay, hey, I could potentially get traded. I potentially will be a free agent. You were very fortunate to spend as much time with one organization as you did, and then dovetail to the Angels at the end of your career. But how much would you have thought? You mentioned David Cohn, you mentioned Brett Saberhagen. I think I'm 99% sure they both ended up playing in New York with the Mets. You're a Philly guy. You hear stories like, Ed Whitson going to the Yankees. Well, he's not a New York kind of guy, or Andy Pettitte was successful there because he knew how to navigate, or Derek Jeter in New York. Again, just random names there. But how much thought would you have given to, you know what? New York, no interest. Boston, no interest. Philly, no interest. And obviously, you're a Philly guy, so that's a little different. But maybe just thoughts you had, conversations you've had with teammates, or would it just have not bothered you? And the reason I'm mentioning those outlets in particular is from the media, the glare,
Right.
the spotlight.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you asked that question. Literally, after we won the World Series, I'm a 23-year-old. Just win the World Series. My first year, we make the playoffs. Second year, we win the World Series. And literally, I get back to my apartment. I turn on the TV, and it says I had been traded to the San Francisco Giants for Chili Davis. I'm like, what? And it was devastating. I look over, I go, wait a minute, San Francisco, I think lost like 90 to 100 games that year. I'm like, wait a minute, how did this happen? So I remember calling John Shearholtz, who at that point is our general manager, and he goes, there's no deal. I don't know where they got that information. He goes, by the way, the only time you get traded is when you don't hear your name. It's when your name's out there all the time, you're not getting moved. That's just somebody circulating those trade rumors. So then, my 6th year, I'm going to be potentially be a free agent. And Steve Balboni, one of my teammates at Kansas City, won the World Series, is back with the New York Yankees. And he told me this after I had signed my extension, but he said the Yankees were going to give you the biggest contract in baseball at that point. And, George Steinbrenner knew I was a Philly guy, knew I would have no problem playing in New York. And even Jim Bowden knows this story too, that they were going to offer me a big time deal to go to the Yankees. And, I was so loyal to the Royals, and I'm glad that never even came about. But if it did come about where I would have been a free agent, that would have been something I would have definitely thought about doing, because as much as a Philly guy, you hate everything about New York. Putting on those pinstripes would have been pretty amazing. And I knew I would have had no problem with the media there, even though it would have been 10 times more people there every single day. That it would have been interesting, would have been fun, but I was glad it never came about because I was a loyal guy to the Royals all the way to the end. And even when I finally was traded, I remember going out. I was pitching against the Minnesota Twins that in '96, and our general manager at that point calls me up and said, "Hey, we have a trade in place to send you to the Texas Rangers. Would you agree to it?" Because at that point I was a 10-5 guy, which means that 10 years in the big leagues, five with the same team, I couldn't be traded anywhere without my permission. So I remember saying, "Hey, listen, let me pitch the game first, and then I'll let you know." So then, lo and behold, I go out there in the first inning, get the first guy out, and then boom, a line drive by Paul Molitor breaks my leg, and boom. So then the trade is off. So then that winter, I get traded to the Angels, and again, I had to agree to the deal, and I was like, okay, my oldest one was going into kindergarten, and I've always been a fan of the Angels. They've always had the biggest names in baseball, from Reggie Jackson to Bobby Grits to Fred Lynn, Don Baylor, all these guys over the years. I'm like, it'd be pretty cool to be closer to home now that my kids are now going to school. And I said, you know what? I'm ready to do this, and I agreed to that deal. Obviously, things didn't work out on the pitching side with the Angels, but it turned out to be a blessing that I agreed to that, because here I am today doing Angels baseball 20 years later.
And I know the answer, but let the audience know, who are you traded for?
Chili Davis, eventually for Chili Davis too, which is crazy. I almost got traded with the Giants back in 1985, and eventually we joke we were friends forever about that. And here I get traded for him there in '97, and it took about 12 years to happen, but we finally got traded for each other. And even last year, being an instructor with the Angels, he was in there. We were still joking about that to this day. So I mean, Chili's a great guy. He was a really good player. It was an honor being traded for him, but I wish I would have pitched a little bit better for the Angels. That's for sure.
And as we wrap up here, we'll talk Angels baseball. Explain your current role for someone who does not know what you do. You're an analyst. You're every game that's televised by the home team, so to speak. You work with a play-by-play announcer who is generally someone who did not play professional ball. The color commentator is usually someone as discussed in the Seinfeld living room, is usually a position held by a former big league baseball player, whether that's fair or not. But talk a little bit about what you do and what your goal is on a nightly basis.
Yeah, the transition, Jeff, went from, obviously to playing, doing some coaching. Then, and next thing you know, I was, doing pre and post game shows. Then that eventually led to an opportunity to be the color analyst, where, I when I first started in this world, I did stuff over at Fox Sports, and they have some of the most amazing people, from Scott Ackerman, who was, an Emmy winner for many years doing that NFL, Sunday show with Howie Long and Strahan and all those guys, where I would do, it was called Baseball Today. It was a kind of a takeoff of Baseball Tonight for ESPN. So we did 4 live shows every day. So after every show, he would bring me in there and say, "This is what you need to do better. This is what you have done well." But the big thing he explained to me, and that's what I've been able to do as a color analyst: tell me something the viewer at home doesn't know. In other words, don't say, "Wow, that was a great home run." Tell me why that was a home run. Tell me what the pitch was. What would he possibly be thinking to look for? What pattern was that guy on the mound doing, or what was the hitter trying to do to set up the pitcher to make that mistake to hit the ball out of the ballpark? And also, don't be one of those guys that, easy second guess. I want you to first guess. In other words, I've always been pretty good as a color analyst, reading body language, knowing I could see where the hitter's gripping the bat, if he's gotten closer to the plate, the movements, and even the breathing of the pitcher on the mound, the guy in the field. So I've always felt comfortable, and you're wrong sometimes, but saying something that will happen before it actually happens leads to, for me, as a viewer watching at home, a better broadcast. So you're thinking, okay, hey, he's going to throw him a slider here, and Trout's got to be ready. I remember doing a game in Boston. So Trout had never hit a home run ever at Fenway Park, as good as his numbers are everywhere. And he hit over 300 there. He's never hit a home run at Fenway Park. You think that with the Green Monster, that should be easy for him to do. So Rick Porcello, a former Cy Young winner, is on the mound. And I said, this is before it even happened. I said, Trouty's, because he got him out on a fastball in, the at bat before. I said Trouty should cheat on a first pitch fastball in because the pitcher, we always remember what we throw successfully. So I said cheat on that first pitch fastball in. And I'll tell you what, Jeff, throws a fastball in first pitch. He swings at it, hits it out over the green monster. Now, he didn't hear me say that, but I let the fans know that this could possibly happen. And a lot of people like were texting me or something out there said that was pretty wild. How'd you know that? I said I didn't know that was going to happen, but I'm just going for what I think I would do on the mound against Trout when I got him out the time before. So I've always been a big believer on this side as far as the color analyst stuff. I know how hard the game, I mentioned that earlier in our interview, how hard this game is. I don't feel like taking shots at players just to say, be that guy like, wow, this guy's not any good. Well, I know how hard it is to be successful, especially in baseball where you play it every day, how hard it is to hit now. I'm not going to be one of those guys back in my day. I don't like that because it's a different world to hit in. Guys are throwing harder more consistently. They're facing less pitchers. I mean, used to be we were going 9 innings every time out. Now they're facing 4 different guys. So it's a hard thing to hit. It's hard to pitch now because you're told as a pitcher to throw max effort. So we don't know where the baseball is going. And guys getting injured because they're throwing as max effort, or like I said. So I love being part of the family. I love when I walk back to my car after a game, fans will come up and go, man, I really love what you said. I love your energy. I love your optimism. Sometimes people say maybe you're too optimistic. I go, I'd rather be optimistic than the guy that's always saying, hey, this team is not really good or not going to win. Because why would you watch the game then? If I'm telling you, boy, this team is not real good. Oh, we're not going to win tonight. Well, why would you waste 3 hours of your life to watch the game if I feel that there's something special? Because every baseball game, I'm telling you, Jeff, something happens that is the most magical thing ever. And it's weird, whether it's last year, where Shohei Ohtani hits into a triple play against the Angels or the Dodgers. I mean, great play by Zach Neto. He's on the base, throws to first base, that no one's shown him a triple play. Those things, like, how is that ever going to happen? When is Shohei ever going to hit into a triple play? When is Mike Trout going to hit his, you're sitting there and Mike Trout hits his 400th home run going like 485 feet against Colorado last year. Something magical can happen every day. You want the fans that are sitting there, giving up their time to watch this. You want to have them on the edge thinking, okay, maybe this is the day I see something special. That day where, combined no-hitter when they honored Tyler Skaggs. How did that ever happen? Taylor Cole and Felix Pena could throw a combined no-hitter that day. That's impossible. So you never know when that moment is going to be. Or if you're watching that playoff game last year where Shohei Ohtani hits 3 home runs, strikes out 10 on the mound. Or when we had a doubleheader when Ohtani was still with the Angels, there was a one-hit shutout in a 9-inning game in Detroit. We're thinking there's no way he's going to be able to move in game 2. He comes out and hits 2 home runs in game 2. Those are the moments I want you as a fan to think this is possible that can happen. So that's why I prepare every day as if it's a showcase game. There always get those, these seminars where, hey, there's a showcase game. I raise my hand and go, no, all 162 games I do is a showcase game because it could be one of those games where some fan, young or old, is going to say, wow, I can't believe I witnessed something that I didn't think was ever possible was going to happen.
When you were breaking in and starting all over, a new profession, you're a rookie all over again. You had played with some of these guys that you had played obviously against many of the guys that you were analyzing, that you were commenting on. Any concerns on your end that, you were going to step on toes, anger friends, anything along those lines?
And knowing I'm going to be on the plane and the bus with these guys. These guys I'm back really basically part of that family once again. And I think they all came up to me and they've heard me, be critical of a play. They go, I understand why you said that because I wasn't in position to make that play, or I didn't make the pitch, or I didn't make that swing. They had no problem because it wasn't like I was, enjoying the fact that they weren't successful. They understood my job is to explain and describe what happened, but not be overly critical just for that purpose of, getting people to, like me more on social media or something like that. So they've always respect the guys, even the young guys and the guys that are so player, the 25th, 26th guy on the roster always come up. Thank you for being honest. And that's the only thing I can really say I'm proud of. Thank you for being honest because I'm being honest, yet I'm still being one of the guys as much as possible.
we'll end with these two questions. Paint a picture of what it's like to be in and around Shohei Ohtani off the field, from a media standpoint. Um,
Well, yeah,
Not what he does on the field. We know what he does
yeah,
on the field, but me having seen it at spring training or at Angel Stadium, I was expecting a lot, and even I was shocked at what I saw. Because again, we're talking a global person, the face of an entire country in a
yeah,
way, and he's been in the big leagues 8 years. I still don't think I know anything about him, so he's an interesting person, I guess, when he's interviewed because he doesn't really say anything, yet he's so covered, just
hmm
mass media, day in, day out. He handles it well, from
yeah,
from what I can tell.
yeah. That's the thing. I built a real good relationship. I don't know how or why. Immediately when he came over to the States and he's going to be an Angel, that his first and only interview he did his rookie year was with me, and he requested that. I couldn't figure that out why. So we built a pretty good, strong relationship, and he was comfortable with me. But just watching him, when he came out, whatever the hotel we're at on the road, immediately you see this tons of people. So it's like quickly on the bus, but then he gets to the field and walks on the field. There's hundreds of people everywhere, everywhere we go. And I always joke around. I said, "Man, how do you do it?" He goes, all I do is focus on playing. And that's the reason why, like, I think there's not many people that ever can do what he's doing because of his mindset, his respect, his dedication. Most people, like, I remember him at people ask, "Hey, you tired?" Everyone would think you're tired from pitching and hitting because after you pitch, I'm telling you, Jeff, your legs, you can't even move. Yet he's playing and hitting a 100-mile-an-hour fastball the next day. He said, and the best thing he does, and it diffuses everything. He goes, "I just want to win," and boom. It's not like, yeah, maybe I'm tired. So then you ask, well, why didn't you ask for a day off and all these things to go forward? He just says he wants to win. So I couldn't even imagine being in a position where he is, where you can't even go anywhere. You can't do anything because there's so many people. Where he goes out and plays catchers, like everyone's taking a picture of it. He goes to throw a bullpen, everyone's taking a picture. He goes to the back cage when he was at Angel Stadium. They were trying to find a way to be able to see him swinging the bat. That's why you never really saw him hit outside all that often in a regular batting practice, because everything he did and still does is chronicalized, and it's taped, and people asking questions. But I've said it often. I don't know if anybody else could handle it like him, and he's been phenomenal doing that.
And we'll end with your thoughts on the Southern California sports landscape. It's kind of known, maybe considered to be laid back, not as intense as on the East Coast. You got obviously the great weather and everything that kind of comes with our market. But this is a very unique marketplace. We have 13 professional sports teams, um, big time college sports, men's and women's. The Olympics come here, the Super Bowl comes here, the WrestleMania comes here. Was it FIFA World Cup comes here? I mean,
Yeah,
look, the Angels right now, as we speak, are not garnering a lot of media attention, but at the same time, they haven't posted a winning record in a number of years. The Dodgers are the darling of the media landscape, yet I think they're covered, with a certain amount of scrutiny as well. The Lakers have LeBron James as we speak. Again, just your general thoughts. We talked about Philly. We talked about that grittiness that comes with it. Now that you're a Southern California transplant, how do you kind of view this marketplace? Maybe some pluses and minuses.
yeah. I think for me, it's phenomenal because I think the sports fans out here have played the majority of the sports that are covered, and you get to play it all the time, 12 months a year. Now, baseball player, I think, even when I was coaching the high school level, I always say, boy, this is like playing minor league baseball. These high school kids are as good as any major league players feels to be, because the competition is there. You see it in football, even watching high school football games and college football games. They're almost like the professional. Same thing with basketball. I think the weather has a big play in it because everyone is pretty good at it, and everyone is trained at all these sports. I think it makes this area that much better, and the fans are knowledgeable because they've all played almost every one of these sports and where they're sitting in the stands and watching these events. In soccer, going to a soccer field now with your kids, it's like I didn't know anything about soccer. Yet everyone knows about soccer here. Golf out here because you can play all the time. Even now with hockey expanding at so many different levels, because there's so in my area where there's there's rinks up there in Simi Valley, up in Santa Clarita. Every sport is played at such a high level and so many incredible athletes at the youngest age. I remember giving a pitching lesson to a kid that was 6 years old. I went to the parents and go, do you think he's going to retain anything that I'm telling? And they said, maybe, maybe not, but he might remember something that it's going to make. And he ended up pitching, in high school baseball. He went down to play at San Diego. Now, I had nothing probably to do with anything I said, but the bottom line is, I think sports fans out here, as difficult it is to say, grow up, I feel like are so much more knowledgeable because they've all played everything and they love it and respect it and enjoy the athleticism instead of to this scream and say, why aren't we winning? Why are not? There's a reason when the things aren't going good. Yeah, they're going to voice their displeasure because they've played every one of these sports at a high level and all the time. 12 months a year, you can do anything out here. And I think that's what makes sports fans that I've noticed that I've been out here now for a long, long time, Jeff. And I find out and see just from conversations, just from watching my wife play tennis yesterday, how good knowledgeable they are at tennis. I mean, I don't even know anything about tennis really, but I'm asking, how they be able to do the spin on the shots and the drop shots and all these things in tennis. Everyone knows it because they all play. Because I think big thing is the weather allows everyone to go out there and to play all these sports 12 months a year.
Mark Gubicza has been our guest. Our goal was to keep this a nice flowing conversation and for you, the students, to learn yet another part of this industry. And in Mark Gubicza, one of the very best to do it. Mark, of course, we thank you for your time and your insight and for passing along your knowledge to this young group.
No, thanks, Jeff. I'll tell you what. Remember, everybody out there, it's love of what you're doing and relationships built. That is the biggest thing I always want to tell everybody. Is building those relationships, whether they're easy or not. Building relationships is the most important thing, even as an athlete playing or certainly on the media side. It's building those relationships like we have, Jeff.
I can't believe I called you Mark this whole time. Thank you, Gooby.
Yeah, I was going to say, who's Mark, by the way? I never heard of that guy. Where'd he come from?
Good stuff, sir. I love the Chili Davis story. Is great.
Yeah, that's a classic one. I'm like, I can't believe we got traded for him 12 years later. It's hilarious.
Wait a minute,
Yeah,
is he getting his Chili Davis stories mixed up? And
yeah.
so it must have been fake, the San Francisco trade, fake news, huh?
Oh, I was so mad at that because they were so bad and there was nobody going to the games. I heard from guys it was the coldest